because we're all on a learning trajectory, and some things come to us easier, to some people easier than other people on different issues. Don't we all have our own types of genius? It's not all the same genius. And we're on this learning journey, this progressive learning journey, and we're just not taught that. We're taught like you got to get the gold star, or your belonging is threatened, your love is threatened, your life is threatened, because they're like, well, how are you going to make it in college if you can't do good? And that's threatening your life.
You're tuned in to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast where compassion inspires action. Together, we're building a world centered in understanding, empathy, and courageous action, starting right here in the heart of Southern Nevada. We're taking the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you to heart. Now, let's welcome a man committed to fostering compassion in every corner of our city, a beacon of compassion in Las Vegas, your host, Will Rucker.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm Will Rucker, and thank you for joining us for this program. It has been such an incredible season, and our guests have been just so inspiring, so insightful. And so we've had to bring a couple of them back a couple times because the timing just did not allow us to plumb the depths of their wisdom. And today's guest is coming back for round 2 because we just had more to talk about. So Pedro, welcome back to Compassionate Las Vegas.
Oh man, thanks for having me.
I'm absolutely thrilled. It's our honor for sure. So when we were speaking before, we talked a lot about belonging and DEI and just really big love. And that's how you chose to define compassion. And so I know that we've spent many times talking about someone that's an inspirational figure for so many. They actually made a Netflix movie about him because of how impactful his life was. And this individual spent his life really bridging cultures. And I think that in our conversation, that's what we've discovered you do, is bridge cultures. And the individual I'm talking about is none other than the great Bishop Carlton Pearson, who many may know from his book on the gospel of inclusion, or his work with Azusa, which was one of the largest Christian conferences ever. And it brought people like T.D. Jakes and the Clark sisters. And I mean, anyone who's anyone in the Christian arena came through Azusa. So I wanted to talk because he was a personal friend of yours. And I wanted to see, what's the biggest lesson you learned from him?
It probably would go back to that compassion, that big love, because out of all the people that I've known in my life, I'm not exaggerating when I say that Carlton Pearson was the most innocent human I've ever met. And to unpack that, when he went through all the things that he went through, when he was touched by big love, and instead of saying, oh shoot, this big love my ministry can't contain this big love, he allowed himself to fall into the depths of big love. And then when he brought that out, people had a reaction to it. And I remember asking him, I met him after this happened, by the way, but I remember asking him, didn't you know that you were going to get this kind of backlash? And he innocently did not think he was. He was, he sometimes would say, well, maybe he was arrogant about thinking that people would just listen to him because he had been listened to by so many thousands and thousands of people. But really, he just was so thrilled with the idea that God's love was bigger than he could have ever imagined. And he was humble enough, truthfully, he was humble enough to say, man, I've been preaching this thing for a lot of years. I've been going down this road for a long time, genuinely and authentically. And it brought me to a place that I didn't expect. And now that it brought me to this place, I have to be humble enough to share what I've observed. And he paid the consequences of that. But he didn't want to hold it against the people who turned on him. And a lot of the people who did turn on him, he still, if they ever had problems, he was the first one uh, to have their back. And I think that says a lot. Uh, it's as I reflect on his life and his death, I personally feel that he died from a broken heart. And I think that his heart was broken because he had poured so much of his life into authentically loving, wanting to be an imitator of Christ. And everything he did it out of sincerity, right? Or whether it manifested as acceptable or unacceptable, he always did it out of a place of big love. And whatever came out of that, even when he got the backlash, he didn't even resist the backlash because he knew that he had taught things in the past that unconsciously he harmed people. He wasn't trying to. He thought he was saving people. He thought he was helping people. And in the course of trying to sincerely help them, he harmed them. So then when the backlash came on him from his own side, he basically was like, well, I guess this is what I get. It's coming back on me from my side, the things that I unconsciously did to harm other people. And so he could also look back and go, well, I see why they're turning on me, because I was one of them. And he, instead of trying to, for the most part, I should say, instead of trying to turn it back on them, he absorbed it. And then I think that diminished his health.
Let's talk about some of
That's
that
painful.
for a bit.
Yeah.
The I also agree. I think it was the brokenheartedness that finally took over his physical body, and I do believe people die from broken hearts. I think that
Yeah.
we've so disconnected mental health from physical health in
Mhm.
the way we address life that we just we miss it. But one thing you said in that I heard misunderstood. And people are often misunderstood. They have intentions that are pure, that are out of
Mhm.
big love, and they still cause harm. So, how do you navigate the space of being misunderstood, of misunderstanding others, of wanting to do something that's beneficial that then creates unintended consequences or harm, and to keep going with that?
Yeah, I mean, I, like him, when I was younger, out of my sincerity, I used to hand out tracts to people and say, "Hey, God loves you, and you're gonna burn in eternal torture and torment for not accepting this love." So, and I did that,
Yeah.
thinking I was doing good. I used to pray for people that weren't Christian and be like, "Oh God, please just do this." I would like try to figure out ways to like pray a prayer that would have God infiltrate this person's free will and make them serve God in the way that I thought they should serve God, because I sincerely loved people. That was a part of my journey. But then I had a Muslim cousin who called me out on it. And he said to me one time, he said, "Man, why you always trying to convert me, man?" And then I said, "Well, I want to be with you in heaven." And he was like, "Well, you ain't even with me on earth. You're
Wow.
like
Yeah.
you take time that we could be hanging out trying to convince me to listen to your family, your parents and grandma. And all I'm doing is listening to my parents." So it's like, why do you think following what your mom and grandma are telling you should overrun or override what my mom and my dad are telling me? And then he's like, "It's the same thing, except for I'm not trying to do that to you." And I was like, and I heard it. So I was harming him,
Yeah.
you know, but I didn't even realize I was harming him, thinking I was loving him. Then he corrected me and I heard it, and then I stopped. And that's I think the challenge in this country, for a lot of people or across the globe, is people don't want to be wrong. And without beating this horse too much, I do think that the fear of being wrong again ties to what I said in the last episode about our fundamental fear of death, that we equate being wrong with a death sentence. And so we try to be right at all costs, and we try to get the right answers at all costs. Even in our educational system, we don't encourage people on their learning journey we reward people for getting the right answers. And when we reward people for getting the quote unquote right answers, people will then do things to justify getting the right answers. So if they say, well, the goal is to get an A so I can get that gold sticker. Well, I can study all the time, or I could cheat and I'll still get the same grade and I'll still get the same gold star. And the gold star is what it's about, because that's what makes you valued. That's what makes you belong. That's what makes you love, all these other things. And so we had that kind of like trained into us.
The gold star in the religious context that you just spoke about is heaven. And
Right.
I think that that's the driving motives for a lot of individuals. It's like the end goal is heaven. And even if you look at the Middle Eastern conflict that has been going on forever,
Hmm.
it's still kind of wrapped in this idea that in the next life, in the next world, we've got to
Right.
get to the end goal versus
Hmm.
really living through that journey. So I
Hmm.
just wanted to interject that.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Yeah. So what I was going to say about how we get educated into this mindset is I remember I took a quiz when I was in, I think it was like 7th grade, and I got a 10. And my teacher was like, Pedro, you got a 10 on this quiz. And she knew my mom. And she said, your family would be so embarrassed. I can't believe you did this bad. And I started laughing. And she was like, it's not funny. And I said, well, I didn't know any of it before, so I'm 10 points up. And she was like, that's ridiculous. So then I did a retake. I got like a 40 or somewhere around there. And then she was like, Pedro, she's like, are you even studying? I said, yeah, it's just not sticking. I'm studying, but it's not sticking. And I said, but man, look, I just went from like a 10 to like a 40. You're not going to give me like a high five or something that I'm clearly learning. This is taking me a while. And she was just like, you should be ashamed of yourself. I don't even want to see your mom in church on Sunday because I know your mom's smart and you're making these low grades. I can't even look in your mom's face. But to me, I was like, I didn't care what she thought. I was like, I'm learning, lady. Like, I might be not learning at your pace, but I went from 0 to 10 to a 40. And eventually I passed it about the 4th or 5th time. And I was like, yes, I did it. I passed it. And she was like, how are you celebrating? But that's how we should be, because we're all on a learning trajectory, and some things come to us easier, to some people easier than other people on different issues. Don't we all have our own types of genius? It's not all the same genius. And we're on this learning journey, this progressive learning journey, and we're just not taught that. We're taught like you got to get the gold star, or your belonging is threatened, your love is threatened, your life is threatened, because they're like, well, how are you going to make it in college if you can't do good? And that's threatening your life. So we're stuck in these paradigms, and they get reinforced in the institutions and in the companies and all the things we're a part of. And so I understand. Like sometimes when I used to get frustrated with people for getting caught up in this stuff. But now I just call them good students, that they got taught that growing up and they believed it. They didn't know any different. They came here innocently, and they became good students. And I think Carlton never said good students, but I think that that's what he understood, was that people just were repeating what they were taught, and that it wasn't personal when they turned on him. And so he learned what he learned, and he kept learning, and he kept trying to teach, but he also understood that the people who were coming out against him were just being good students. And I think that that's how we kind of keep moving forward. And we realized that sometimes we were good students that harmed people, because we learned from our environment and our system that was the way to respond to a situation. And then once we learn a better way, we just come back and we just teach. I think that that's probably how we
Here's a
do it.
quote by Maya Angelou and I'm probably going to not get it exactly right, but the essence is when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And
Hmm.
then I've also heard people add on, believe them the first time. And
Hmm.
so, just total transparency, never been a fan of that particular quote, but a lot of people really gravitate to it. And I think there is some truth in there. But the reason I bring that up is the idea of change. And
Hmm.
in the instance of Bishop Carlton Pearson, he evolved or changed,
Hmm.
and people didn't love that. They were like,
Right.
even at his homegoing, his funeral, people were like, And that's the Carlton that we like. And as he was transitioning, when he was on his literal deathbed, people were like, and we're going to call you back to this place in 1980
Mhm.
when, it's now 2024, but we want you to be who you were. And so I wonder your thoughts on evolution, on people growing and iteration and becoming new versions of themselves, and how you navigate maybe the person you fell in love with or the person you begin to idolize or study as they continue their life path and become something different. And just kind of one more and on that. And do people ever really change?
Hmm. Starting with the do people ever really change? I want to believe that we do, and there's a possibility that we don't. It's a possibility that we come into the world blueprinted and that we just grow into the blueprint. Like an oak tree is an oak tree from the seed to the manifestation of the tree. And even though it's changed, its essential oak treeness never changes. And so there's that way of looking at it. And I don't know in terms of how people are, but the way I experience myself is that I have changed and evolved, and that every person has and does. Like I tell my daughters when they struggle and say they want to try something new, but they're scared of messing up. I'll just tell them like, dude, like don't think like that, because listen, when you came into the world, all you could do was eat and poop and sleep, and then you changed. Like you learned to do other things, and you can continue to learn to do other things. That capacity and ability to do that has never gone away, and it never will go away as long as you're alive. Only your thoughts about it can become static, but the capacity is always dynamic. And so we can always do that. And so, I would say, yeah, people can change. To me, I'm like, I've changed so many times. Like, I think you know that I'm like technically on the autism spectrum. And to myself, I can look at my own narrative. And there was a time where whether I could or couldn't, I don't know, but there was these times from a communication standpoint, um, I would not have conversations with people that I thought that what they were saying made no sense. And so I would just be like, if I started realizing they didn't make sense, I would just stop talking to them and just walk away. And if they asked me, why'd you walk away? I didn't have the nuance to say, oh, first of all, back then I would have just said, well, everything you said was ignorant, and my brain just doesn't like listening to ignorant things. So
I
I
can
just can't
so
talk to you.
relate. Like you have no idea. I'm just in there like, yep, if I could just walk away, I
Yeah, yeah,
would have done it several times.
yeah. And I used to say stuff like that. And when I said it, I didn't know that I was hurting people's feelings. And it wasn't because I was like, I knew I just knew to tell the truth. So if they told me and I could walk away, like I could say it in their face, but the thing I thought I was being compassionate by just stopping and walking away, because I could tell I was about to say, I don't want to listen to you anymore. And I knew that that probably wasn't what I should say. So I would just like walk off because I didn't know another option. So I would just like walk off. And and then and when I would say something like I'm not trying to be funny, but I used to say something just like I'd be like, I'm done. And then the person say, hey man, well, how come you're not talking to me or whatever? I say, listen, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but everything you're saying is completely ridiculous. I don't like having these kinds of conversations. And I feel like if I was on my deathbed and I could have 5 more minutes of life, but it had to end because I had this conversation with you, I would say, why did I waste 5 minutes talking to this person? So I choose to live 5 extra minutes instead of having this conversation with you. Bye. And then they were like, you a-hole. But I thought, like, if I tell you clearly, then you'll learn, I'll learn, and it'll be like, as you
I've
said,
got to say this. I think autism is actually a superpower. Honesty to me is a superpower. And if
mm-hmm,
we could all just actually say what it is we meant,
Mhm.
I think the world would be a much, much safer place,
Mhm.
a better place. And a lot of the issues where you're talking about that sense of belonging and fears and all of those things, I think are because we're wearing these masks and projecting these
Mhm.
images and not having the conversations we
Yeah.
need to have. So,
Yeah.
but that's just maybe my autistic way of viewing the world. But
No, I no, I agree with you, and it's like, it's very it's funny to me. I just told my daughter a couple days ago that it was like a superpower. One of my friends, he's a mentor too, named Marshall Thurber. He talked about a lot about positive deviance, which is based off of the work of another person whose name I can't remember. But he used to teach these classes on what is to be a positive deviant. So there's people that deviate from societal norms, and some people do it negatively. So they're like anarchists or they do something. And there's some people who deviate from societal norms in a positive direction. So I choose to look at myself as a positive deviant as opposed to um, like what it's called neurodivergent. It's like I look at myself as being a positive deviant and using my powers for good. I mean, I obviously it took me a while. I had to figure out how to express myself in a way that didn't. And once I realized that I was hurting people's feelings, I stopped doing it. But at first I didn't know. I just thought clarity was the best thing that I could offer to a moment. Even when in the Bible it says Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Anything else comes from the evil one," right? So I literally took it like that. Like, okay, let me just tell this person exactly what I think. They'll know, I'll know. It'll be good. And like a person could do the same thing to me. Like a person can be like I one time I kind of had a crush on a girl when I was in high school, and I just said, "Oh, hey, I would be interested in getting to know you better. Um, what do you think about that?" And like, because I wasn't scared of girls like a lot of guys were, because I didn't know to be scared. So I just like I would be interested in getting to know you better. She said, "Ew," and and I was like, "Oh, okay. So that means you don't like me then." Okay, and I didn't feel anything. Like I didn't feel less. I didn't feel more. I was like, I offered her a choice. She was like, "My preference is no," and I was like, "Okay, fine." And some people, they would be like, that hurts so bad." And I'd be like, "Well, how?" And I didn't understand. I was like, "Why would you be hurt that somebody you like doesn't like you? They don't have to like you. Like, why do you think that they would like you?" And I would just say, like, you made up the story of them liking you in your own mind. Now you found out the truth that they don't like you. You should take responsibility for the made up story you made and not hold it against them by being holding them emotionally hostage because you want to cry because of a story you made up. You crying over your own fake story. And people are like, "You don't understand." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. You are fake. Like, you made up something. Truth showed up. And instead of accepting truth showing up, you decided, I want to continue to believe my fake story and be heard about it." And I don't get that. I still feel that way, but I wouldn't say that to anybody now. I would just be like, "Okay, then I understand." Or I
I
accept
love
it.
it.
So,
So on that same kind of note, and then I want to just end with asking a few questions here. Uh, I do think that there are stories that aren't told in
mhm,
that no, or even in that yes.
mhm,
And I think we have to get better as a society, as a people, as a race, as human race,
mhm,
as at telling the story and the why behind it,
mhm,
because a lot of that creates additional insecurity. And there are these layers, I call it political theater, that
mhm,
people have to navigate through when if we just simply did it like it is, we wouldn't have to try to figure it out so much.
mhm.
So that's just my little offering to the world is, as you said, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. And I think we'll be in a better place. So as we close this episode, what I'd like to do is just have you first thing that pops to mind, and I'm really excited, especially with you for this, to see what you say. But I'm going to start a sentence, and I just want you to finish the sentence.
Mhm. Okay.
Sound good? All
Yeah.
right. First one. What the world needs now.
Is love, sweet love? Because that song just came into my mind.
Okay. How about the best things in life?
Oh man, I'm gonna go with the second thing because the second thing is the first thing is are free. So the best things in life are mysterious.
Mystery is.
Knowing that you don't know and being excited about it.
I am.
I am. I am alive.
If only.
If only I had the time to tell you that there is no time.
If you had a billboard and you had put one thing that the whole world would see on it, what would that be?
Free love, and it'd be a double entendre. So it'd be like love is free and liberate love from the confines of our limitations.
Last sentence. Love is.
Love is would just be the sentence. There would be nothing else after it. This love is.
Well, my friend, I so appreciate you joining the podcast and for sharing your insights and wisdom and experiences. I think this has been one of my, can't say favorites because all of my episodes are my favorite, but it is certainly high on my list of enjoyment. I think I can
Awesome.
say that safely.
Thanks
So
for your
how do people
honesty.
get in touch? Yeah. How do people get in touch with you, learn more about your projects and connect?
Um, my email address, which I'm gonna give out, is Pedro, Pedro at Unify, YOUNIFY.org. So Pedro at unified.org. And then um I have a podcast called What's So Funny About, which is a comedy podcast. And you can just look up What's So Funny About with Pedro Silva on most podcast platforms. And then Instagram is at The Roofless Church, TheRooflessChurch. And also have a blog called therooflesschurch.com, and one called it'sallinme.com, ITSALLINME.com. And that's from Whitney Houston's song, I Am Every Woman, even though I'm not a woman, but she said it's all in me. And I, for some reason, just decided to name my blog after that.
I love it. So a number of ways to connect. And again, just thank you for your spirit and for being you.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Rucker. And as I always remind you, you are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. And what you do matters. So live compassionately. I'll see you next time.